As the world races to secure critical minerals for electric vehicles and clean energy, deep sea mining is entering the spotlight. But not without controversy. Impossible Metals says it has the technology to mine the ocean, the floor, without destroying it. Using autonomous underwater vehicles and AI, the company claims it can collect nodules while protecting marine life and reducing sediment damage. Our CEO, Oliver Gunasekara, joins us to explain how this approach works and why it may hold the key to responsible deep sea mining. Oliver, thanks very much indeed for your time.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Well, in simple terms, what problem are you solving and how's your approach different from typical deep sea mining?
Yeah, I think that the fundamental problem is the world needs massive quantities of critical minerals as we electrify everything. And it's getting more expensive on land as a lot of the good stuff has already been mined, the grades are getting lower, and there's a lot of environmental and social destruction that happens where, for instance, 75% of the world's nickel comes from rainforests in Indonesia, and we have big social impacts. So what we thought was the ocean makes a lot of sense. There is huge quantities of these polymetallic nodules that I'm holding up on the ocean floor. But the technology that everyone else is pursuing was fundamentally invented in the 1960s, tested in the 70s. It's a dredging tractor system with a riser system, and it does have some environmental challenges. So we took a blank sheet of paper and said, how could we invent a collection system that minimizes those environmental impacts and also is less expensive? And so that's what we've built.
Now, you use autonomous vehicles that hover and harvest selectively, right? How does that actually work? How does it compare to what others, like other companies in your sphere, are doing at the moment?
It's completely different. So we took a blank sheet of paper and said, let's break the problem and use first principles. Let's look at the collection piece, the vertical transport piece, and then the transport to shore. And so if we talk about each of them, the collection piece, we don't have a vehicle that gets lowered to the seabed floor. There are no tracks. There is no vacuuming or suction. What we have is an autonomous underwater vehicle, an underwater robot that hovers. And this robot hovers about a meter above the seabed floor. It has stereo lights and cameras, and it looks ahead of the vehicle. And it's looking for three things. It's looking for the seabed. It's looking for the actual polymetallic nodules that we want. And then it's looking for anything else. And anything else we assume is life, a deep sea coral, a sponge, or other forms of organic life. And we use AI algorithms running on the NVIDIA graphics processor on the vehicle to, if we identify that additional life, we quarantine it. We basically put a circle, a virtual circle around the area, and the vehicle flies over the top, leaving that area undisturbed. In addition, we have committed to always leave 60% by number, about 30% by mass of the nodules undisturbed so that we don't impact them. Now, once the vehicle uses its mechanical arms to pick up, it's hovering, and it uses an array of mechanical arms to pick up the nodules, store them inside. Once the payload is full, the vehicle uses its battery and propulsion system, a buoyancy engine we invented, to float to the surface. Once it's close to the surface, it gets recovered with an automatic crane, another piece of technology we've invented, where the vehicle gets recovered. The battery is swapped with a new fully charged battery, the payload is emptied, and now the vehicle can be redeployed.
Look, sediment plumes are a big concern. I mean, how does your Eureka 3, for example, keep them contained? I read a little bit about it. And what did the harbor test show?
Yeah, so sediment plumes is one of the big concerns that we want to avoid. So by not having tracks, by not landing, by not injecting water, by not having a riser system, which then has to dewater on the ship and pump the sediment back, we have significantly reduced them. And from some modeling that we've been doing, we would be about 1,000 times less sediment disturbance. Now, there will be a small amount of disturbance as we use mechanical arm to pick, but as I said, we don't have tracks, we are not injecting water, we don't have a riser system, we don't have a discharge plume. So significantly less sediment would be disturbed.
I heard you describe the actual mechanical process, and your tech feels more like space exploration than mining to someone without the without the trained eye and ear. What's innovative about your AUVs, and how does that help in the field?
There's a lot of innovation, but there's also a lot of off-the-shelf tech that we inherit from existing AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles. You have to understand that the biggest market by far today for autonomous underwater vehicles is Navy, is military. All militaries have moved to drones. There are huge numbers of them. And so we can use that technology, package it. But there were three things that didn't exist that we absolutely needed for this application. The first is the mechanical arms. There have been arms on underwater vehicles, but typically just one, and typically very slow. We needed an array. Eureka 3 will have 12, but we needed them to be super fast, like pick and place, the type of speed you would see in a factory. That's a unique design that we've invented that can work at 6 kilometers underwater. The second thing is the propulsion. Instead of using primarily thrusters, propellers, we use a buoyancy engine. It's a unique design. It's a sphere that we can pump water in and out of. And it allows us to move very efficiently up and down the water column. It also supports what we call dynamic buoyancy, because each time we pick up one of the nodules, we make the vehicle heavier. And if we didn't offset its weight, the vehicle would start to sink. And so the dynamic buoyancy allows us to pump out a small amount of water from the buoyancy system to keep the vehicle neutral and hence hovering. The third is the AI algorithms. We're using stereo cameras. We have to real time recognize the seabed, the nodules, and any form of life. And all of that is proprietary. Of course, all the other components like the battery and the navigation system and the compute system and the thrusters, etc. Those are off-the-shelf components used in other vehicles underwater, but we have to integrate them electrically, mechanically, and write software for them.
Oliver, I've got to ask you, just taking a few steps back here and looking at some of the responses, especially by activists. You know, you've had one deep sea mining company in recent months, which presumably went bankrupt, and we've seen that in a bit of the headlines in the activist papers. Does that concern you that the arguments by activists are really beginning to put some influence here now and stopping investors from actually throwing in? How do you feel about that?
It's definitely been a challenging environment to fundraise. I think you have to understand what are the motivations of the activists and how are they funded. Our view is that the majority of the countries, for instance, that are opposed to deep sea mining are doing it because they want to protect their domestic mining. Deep sea mining will be substantially less expensive. We estimate 20 times less expensive than an average nickel mine. From last year. So it presents a very, very big threat to existing land-based mining. And so you can imagine that existing land-based mining and countries are funding and trying to stop this industry from starting. And of course, the environmentalists also have concerns, but as we've shown with our technology, by using AI, by hovering, we can significantly minimize the impact. And compare that to how we mine on land, it's orders of magnitude better. But it is a concern, and it is something that is, companies like Greenpeace and WWF and Pew are very, very well funded. We are the small guys. They're the big, massive corporations that are well funded to try to stop the industry from starting.
All right, we'll leave it there. Impossible Metals CEO Oliver Gunasekara, thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.